Imagine this. The church bells toll, the aisle is lined with flowers, and the guests rise as the bride steps forward. But then in a heartbeat she turns, her veil torn, her eyes wild, and she runs. The groom stands frozen, the whispers start, and the air thickens with disbelief. Why would she leave on the day meant to bind them forever? What secret was so powerful, so consuming, that it shattered everything? Stay with me because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a warning. In the small town of Drew, everyone knew Naomi Johnson, though few truly understood her. To most, she was the embodiment of grace, a schoolteacher who moved with quiet dignity, who smiled even when life weighed heavy on her shoulders. But behind her calm exterior, Naomi carried secrets. There were glimmers in her eyes, fleeting and sharp, like a dove hiding a thorn, signaling a part of her past and heart that she had never fully shared. It was this hidden depth that made her both beloved and enigmatic, a woman whose story would soon shake the entire community. Terrance Whitfield, the man she had chosen to marry, was a figure admired by many in Drew. Tall, confident, and diligent, he had the bearing of a lion. But as impressive as his exterior seemed, there were cracks beneath the surface. A weakness in his loyalty, a restlessness in his gaze that hinted at choices yet to be revealed. Those who knew him best often wondered if his strength was genuine or merely a mask for the truths he kept buried. Aunt Essie, Naomi's great-aunt, was a fixture of the town's history, a woman whose laughter could light a room yet conceal more than it revealed. Her voice, warm and teasing, carried a weight of knowledge that few dared to question. In Drew, Aunt Essie was known as a guide, but her guidance was wrapped in riddles, like a trickster crow whose wings stirred the winds of fate. She often watched Naomi with eyes that saw far beyond what anyone else noticed, sensing the unseen threads that might soon unravel. Then there was Kahlil, Terrance's cousin, a quiet observer who spoke little but noticed everything. His presence was subtle, almost ghost-like, yet the weight of his gaze suggested he understood more than anyone dared admit. In many ways, Kahlil was the shadow that knew too much, the one whose awareness could tip the delicate balance of truths kept hidden for years. Each of these figures, with their unique strengths and flaws, carried secrets that would collide on that day. Their lives intertwined in ways that seemed ordinary at first glance, but as with any tale rooted in a town like Drew, appearances were rarely the whole story. And even as they smiled, laughed, and prepared for the celebration, an unseen tension hummed beneath the surface. Because in this story, as in life, not everyone is who they seem to be, and every heart holds its own shadow. Long before the wedding day, long before the aisle and the whispers of the town, Naomi and Terrance shared a history that few understood. They had grown up on the same streets of Drew, their childhoods intertwined like the roots of the old oak trees lining the river. Naomi remembered the afternoons when Terrance would race her down the dirt roads, the two of them laughing until their sides ached, their small hands brushing as they tried to outpace one another. Those memories carried a warmth, a nostalgia for a simpler time, but as they grew, so did the complexities between them. Their families, once close neighbors, had nursed old grievances for decades. Arguments over land, misunderstandings passed down like heirlooms, and silent resentments that made every gathering a careful dance. And then there was Kahlil, Terrance's cousin, who had always lingered on the edges of Naomi's life. The whispers began long before the wedding. The subtle glances, the quiet conversations, the sense that perhaps not all feelings had remained in the past. Some said Kahlil's loyalty to his cousin was unquestionable. Others suspected that Naomi's heart held space for more than one man. The triangle, though unspoken, hovered over them all like a storm cloud waiting to break. Signs, too, had begun to appear, signs that Naomi could not ignore. On quiet nights, she dreamed of ancestors standing at the edge of the riverbank, their voices low but urgent, warning her of decisions yet to be made. A few days before the wedding, a bird struck the window of her room, scattering feathers across the floor, a small omen that sent a shiver down her spine. Aunt Essie had whispered her own caution, leaning close and saying, "What is hidden under the cloth will be shown in the sun." Naomi had laughed off the comment at the time, yet it lingered in her mind, echoing in the quiet hours before dawn. In Drew, everyone talked, everyone speculated. The community's voice was a river flowing through streets and stores, carrying pieces of truth, half-truths, and rumors. A friend of Terrance's had overheard him arguing in secret, words clipped, tense, full of meaning yet left incomplete. Aunt Essie's laughter, usually so constant, had cut off abruptly the moment Naomi entered her room one evening, leaving a hush that spoke louder than words. And at rehearsal, a misplaced wedding ring became the catalyst for whispers, a symbol of cracks forming in what was supposed to be flawless. The tension built slowly, a subtle pressure that made the air almost tangible, a constant reminder that every choice, every word, every glance had weight. The town felt it, the families felt it, and Naomi felt it most of all. Every step toward the wedding day was a step into uncertainty, a careful navigation between duty, love, and fear. If this story already feels like a warning, don't just watch silently, subscribe now so you never miss the lessons hidden in our tales. Because in Drew, even the smallest secrets have the power to change everything, and by the time the sun rises on the wedding day, the town will never be the same again. As the wedding day approached, the calm of Drew began to crack, revealing the tension that had been quietly simmering beneath the surface. At the rehearsal dinner, laughter filled the hall, the clinking of glasses punctuating the evening. But amid the celebration, a sharp sound cut through the warmth, a phone ringing. Terrance excused himself, stepping outside to answer. A guest lingering near the doorway overheard his words, soft but unmistakable, "My love, yes, I'll see you soon." The words hung in the cool night air, a whisper of betrayal that spread through the room before anyone could stop it. Naomi, unaware of this moment, felt an inexplicable weight pressing on her chest, a quiet unease she could not shake. The next day, as she moved through wedding preparations, a strange old woman appeared in the garden, her eyes fixed on Naomi with a look that was both piercing and urgent. "Look behind, not ahead," she said, her voice carrying a strange rhythm, almost like a warning carried from another time. Naomi paused, trying to brush it off, but the words clung to her, looping in her mind with every breath. Later, as the broom for the traditional jump awaited her, she hesitated. The ritual, meant to symbolize unity and the start of a shared life, felt heavier than it ever should. Her hands lingered over the wood, her mind swirling with doubt. Through the town, voices carried fragments of truth in different ways. Aunt Essie, in her quiet, teasing manner, remarked to a neighbor, "Not all that glitters is gold, especially in hearts that hide shadows." A longtime friend whispered to Naomi's mother, "Terrance has secrets he thinks no one knows." And even Kahlil, usually silent, let slip to a close confidant, "Be careful who you trust, Naomi, some truths can't stay buried." The repetition, coming from so many angles, built a tension that wrapped around the town, tightening with each passing hour. The more they tried to hide it, the more the truth fought to come out, surfacing in small ways that gnawed at the edges of what everyone believed. And then, the night before the wedding, just as the moon hung low over Drew, Kahlil was seen slipping Naomi a small note, folded carefully and pressed into her hand. She looked at it for only a moment before hiding it in her pocket, but that moment carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. What was written there? The town, the families, even Naomi herself, could feel that something was about to break. And as the streets of Drew slept under a quiet sky, none could guess how the morning would unfold, how the smallest actions would spiral into a scandal that would linger for years to come. The morning sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of First Baptist Church, spilling patterns of color across the pews. Guests whispered nervously, sensing that something in the air was off, though no one could name it. Naomi entered, her dress flowing behind her, a picture of poise on the surface, but inside, her heart pounded like a drum. Terrance stood at the altar, hands trembling ever so slightly, a forced smile masking the fear that churned behind his eyes. The congregation leaned forward, drawn into the tension that seemed to thrum in the very walls. Then came the first sign that the day would not go as planned. A woman in the crowd began to sob quietly, her shoulders shaking with a grief that Naomi instantly recognized, not her own, but something she could feel in the marrow of the room. Eyes met, whispers grew louder, and Naomi's stomach clenched. She had suspected tension before, but now the pieces of the puzzle started to surface. She stepped closer to Terrance, her hands brushing against his, searching for truth in his touch, in the way he avoided her gaze. The second layer of revelation came swiftly. Naomi discovered evidence hidden in a folded note, tucked carelessly in Terrance's pocket. A ring receipt, a photograph, an engagement announcement she had never been told about. Terrance had been engaged before, secretly, to someone else, a truth carefully buried until now. Her breath caught, her heart raced, and the congregation began to murmur. Faces turned pale, some covered their mouths while others froze, unsure of what to say. Then the third shock struck like lightning. Kahlil stepped forward, his shadowed presence undeniable, and with a voice steady but heavy with guilt, he confessed the unthinkable. He was the father of Naomi's unborn child. A collective gasp filled the room, breaking the fragile air of civility. Gasps turned to cries, cries to arguments. Elders shook their heads, muttering words carried through generations. "The ancestors warned us." The weight of past sins and hidden truths collided, leaving everyone unprepared for the chaos unfolding before them. Naomi, her mind spinning with betrayal, love, and fear, turned abruptly. Without a word, she ran, the hem of her gown trailing behind her like a streak of white in the panic-stricken room. Guests rose, unsure whether to follow, to intervene, or simply to watch the unraveling of what was meant to be a celebration of love. Terrance remained at the altar, frozen, while Kahlil stood quietly, carrying the burden of his confession. Imagine standing in that hall, hearing the truth unravel before your eyes. Would you have stayed silent? Would you have intervened or walked away like Naomi? Subscribe now, because silence is how scandals grow, and the story of Drew, and of Naomi, Terrance, and Kahlil, is far from over. The chaos of the wedding day did not end when Naomi fled the church. It simply spread beyond its walls, carried through the streets of Drew like wildfire. Guests scattered, their whispers morphing into conversations in every corner of the small town. The gossip, sharp and relentless, traveled faster than the wind, wrapping around every neighbor, every friend, every family member, until the scandal had touched nearly every home. Terrance stood alone in the empty church, the weight of his humiliation pressing on him. His secrets, once carefully hidden, had been laid bare in front of the entire community. Every glance that followed him, every whispered question, reminded him that nothing could erase the truth. Yet even in the depths of shame, he could not entirely escape the consequences of choices long made, and the heavy cost of deception weighed on him like a storm cloud refusing to pass. Naomi, though shaken and broken, discovered a new kind of strength in her departure. Walking away was not surrender, it was survival. With each step, she reclaimed a part of herself that had been overshadowed by fear, expectation, and the tangled web of secrets surrounding her. Her tears were fierce but purposeful, a cleansing that allowed her to see her own resilience in the midst of heartbreak. Kahlil, too, felt the weight of the day, torn between the shame of revealing the truth and the relief of unburdening himself. Speaking his secret had altered the course of lives he cared for, and though it brought him no joy, it brought clarity to the chaos. He understood that honesty, no matter how painful, carried a weight that could not be ignored. From the back of the crowd, Aunt Essie observed silently. Her eyes, sharp and knowing, met Naomi's for a moment, and she delivered her chilling line. The ancestors see what the eyes pretend not to. Those words, heavy with generations of wisdom, hung in the air like a warning echoing through time. Through the town, voices rose in conflicting currents. Some pitied Naomi, seeing the courage it took to step away from a life that could not be lived honestly. Others blamed her, holding fast to traditions and expectations that had been shattered. And yet, despite the divided opinions, everyone remembered. Every whispered detail, every glance, every sigh was carried forward, a permanent mark on the memory of Drew. And in the midst of it all, the lessons of the story became clear. Betrayal cannot remain hidden forever. Truth persists even when ignored, and the weight of love, when entwined with secrets, carries consequences that touch everyone in its path. The town had witnessed a scandal, but it had also witnessed courage, honesty, and the enduring power of facing what must be faced even when it hurts. And so, the day meant to bind hearts became the day truth tore them apart. The broom was never jumped, the vows never sealed. The sunlight that had promised celebration now shone on shattered trust and exposed secrets. Yet even in the midst of heartbreak, there is a lesson to be found. One that speaks across generations, reminding us that courage, honesty, and the strength to walk away are sometimes the truest forms of love. From broken unions rise the strongest lessons, and from whispers, warnings. In Drew, and in every town where secrets linger, these stories are never forgotten. They are carried forward, quietly shaping the lives of those who listen, who remember, and who learn. If this story shook you, don't leave quietly. Subscribe to Nkechi's Folktales, turn on your bell, and share in the comments. What would you have done if you were Naomi? Would you have stayed, or would you have walked away to protect your truth? And while you wait for the next scandal, explore the other tales already waiting for you, each one holding its own warning, its own lesson, its own reflection of the human heart. Because in every whispered story, there is wisdom waiting for those who pay attention.